There's been a lot of talk about how certain species of non-native plants and animals are upsetting the ecosystems in various parts of the United States and the world. South Florida is dealing with Burmese pythons. Many Midwestern rivers are overrun with Asian carp. And plants such as Japanese knotweed and English ivy are choking out other more desirable plants in gardens, woodlands, and developed areas in the U.S. and overseas. How did these alien plants and animals get here? Are they really that harmful? And what can we do, if anything, to contain or eradicate them? Fred Pearce is a British science journalist who has studied the issue extensively. He writes about it in his book, The New Wild: Why Invasive Species Will Be Nature's Salvation. We asked him what an invasive or alien species actually is.
Well, we're talking about alien species that have come in from outside and take hold. People then talk about them being invasive. Actually, you can have domestic species that are invasive too, but we kind of tend to ignore them. We get a downer on foreigners, basically. We're talking about foreign species coming in where they haven't been seen before. People get a bit upset about that.
In the UK, it's the Japanese knotweed that's got people up in arms. There's even an official Japanese knotweed officer, the only one in the world, headquartered in Swansea, Wales, to keep track of and try to eradicate the plant. But where did it and other alien species come from?
Sometimes it's deliberate. Japanese knotweed here in the UK, it was brought in by gardeners, Victorian gardeners, about 150 years ago. They looked pretty good in the garden, but then they escaped over the wall and they started spreading around through the suburbs. Sometimes nature brings them. They just fly in, or they can move around, especially marine species move around on the ocean currents. That's pretty normal. It's been going on forever. And sometimes they hitchhike a ride. They turn up in grain stores, so they just travel with the grain, or they may travel in your backpack, or they come in cargo holds. Ballast water tanks on ships are a big way of moving marine species around. So if you go to San Francisco Bay, hundreds of alien species there, and most of them arrive on ships one way or another.
The numbers of many invasive species are amazing, at least on their face. Pearce says that the way many governments count the infestations of aliens is exaggerated, makes it sound like an entire region is overgrown, when in fact, there might not be more than one or two of the plants in the area.
I came across a case of a weed in the UK which goes along riverbanks, and you see it from time to time, but the surveyors said that if you find one example or stretch of riverbank, they will mark it down as that riverbank has been invaded. So then you add up all these bits of the riverbank that have been invaded by this plant, and it looks like it's taken over the whole riverbank for miles and miles and miles. And it's complete nonsense. There's just a few examples.
Pearce says that often invasions by these foreign plants are blown out of proportion. He suggests that we all calm down and quit being so paranoid about it. Dow Orion agrees. She's a permaculture educator and author of the book Beyond the War on Invasive Species, a permaculture approach to ecosystem restoration. She says that often a so-called alien species like the Japanese knotweed isn't so much an invader as it is a way for nature to reclaim land that humans have made uninhabitable by native species.
One of the concerns with Japanese knotweed is that it appears to crowd out native vegetation. But one of the issues that I see is that given this degraded state of streams and waterways in the temperate climate world, basically America, England, Europe, is Japanese knotweed the only type of species that will live there now? Because we don't even know if native species will survive and thrive in the type of environments that we've created. So is the issue the knotweed, or is the issue the way that we use and interact with waterways and water resources?
As for alien plants overtaking native species, Orion says that many of those flowers, trees, and other plants that we call native aren't the result of Mother Nature's haphazard spreading of seeds around the country. In fact, they were put there by design and cultivated by humans.
A lot of plant species and animal species that we think of as native or as wildflowers were actually managed by indigenous people in the Americas for food and fiber, for medicine. And that's an aspect of this whole kind of invasion ideology that I think is really missing up to this point.
By the same token, many animals that are considered native are not native at all. Pearce says that Europeans who came here from the Old World brought two of our most beneficial bugs with them.
You didn't have earthworms until they showed up from Europe. You probably did before the last ice age, but the last ice age had wiped them out of most of North America, except down in the far south. Earthworms came back when Europeans showed up, completely changed your soils. Honeybees, everybody gets very worried about the diseases that have been attacking honeybees, and we've got to save our American bees. Guys, you didn't have any bees until Europeans brought them over 500 years ago. So surprising things that you think are kind of natural, native part of the environment. Turns out they showed up from somewhere else a few hundred years ago.
He says that when alien species show up, like the earthworms and the honeybees did 500 years ago, nature usually has a way of making them fit into the ecosystem. So we shouldn't panic, but allow the Earth time to work it out for herself.
We tend to think that species of kind of plants and animals and insects and so on have co-evolved, is a phrase that gets used a lot, over millions of years to be sort of perfectly fitting into their local ecosystem. But if you talk to ecologists who actually analyze how ecosystems really work, they find it's very different. They find species are constantly moving in and out. Animals are eating one thing and then they move on to eat something else. They get eaten by one thing and then get eaten by something else. Everything is much more kind of dynamic, and it's a sort of constantly changing kaleidoscope of species. There are not many places in the world where ecosystems are unchanging, and probably where they are unchanging, it's really rather unhealthy because they're more vulnerable. I think change is good. Change is what is wild about nature, and we should cherish that and look out for some of these incoming species, the go-getter colonists. These are like go-getter humans. These people can be a bit disruptive. These species can be a bit disruptive, but we need them. It's part of the dynamism of our ecosystems, the same as we need people coming in from outside to be dynamic, to be go-getters in order to keep our societies going. So I think maybe that's balance. I don't know. We certainly need them.
You can find out more about the upsides of invasive species in Fred Pierce's book, The New Wild, Why Invasive Species Will Be Nature's Salvation, available on Amazon and through independent publisher Beacon Press at beacon.org. You can also find Dow Orion's book, Beyond the War on Invasive Species, a permaculture approach to ecosystem restoration, online or through the website resiliencepermaculture.com. To find out more about all of our guests and past shows, visit viewpointsradio.org. This segment originally aired in June 2015 and was written by Pat Reuter. I'm Gary Price.
Since World War I, more than 645,000 service members have given their lives in defense of our freedom. On Memorial Day, we pause to honor and remember these men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice. Join USAA this Memorial Day weekend in paying tribute to these heroes by dedicating a poppy, the enduring symbol of remembrance, and engage in the social conversation using the hashtag #HonorThroughAction. To learn more about how you can honor those who gave their all, visit poppyinmemory.com.
A recent survey of 2,000 Americans conducted by a OnePoll finds that 98% of Americans think you need more protein than you do. The survey also shows that 55% worry they couldn't survive on a vegan diet based on the amount of protein they think they need. In fact, misconceptions about protein and plant-based lifestyles abound. Only 1 in 3 respondents know that 2 cups of cooked lentils is equal to the same amount of protein in a 5-ounce steak, according to Vegan Strong Assistant Director and Strength Athlete Danny Taylor.
Most people don't realize that plants have all the protein you need, yet many elite athletes are converting to a plant-based diet because it's helping their performance and strength improve dramatically.
Eating a whole food plant-based diet can meet your protein needs while being affordable and effective. Find out more at veganstrong.com. That's veganstrong.com.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows. And find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.
Coming up on Viewpoints.
I always tell people to go to Fenway Park. It's historic. It's been around for over 100 years. It's still really great to look at. It's quirky. It's a cool vibe around the ballpark.
Getting back to the great American pastime, baseball at the ballpark. Then,
they would lie about their positions. They would lie about their titles. They would lie about whether they've been married before or not.
Inside the world of wedding announcements, I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.